Shalom, everybody, and greetings from Ma'ale Adumim. In just a couple of days, Jews all over the world will be celebrating Pesach. And for most of the people, vast majority of the people around the world, this year's Pesach will truly be different than any other Pesach in the Jewish history. Because this year, we have so many people who are going to be celebrating Pesach alone, celebrating Pesach with a much smaller Seder than they originally anticipated, and some who may not even be able to celebrate the Pesach Seder this year. I'd like to share with you a thought that may help just a little bit as we enter this unusual, difficult time when we enter the Seder for Pesach of Tafshin Pei. I've said a similar idea in the past, and I'd like to try to apply it here. If you take a look at the makot that the Egyptians received before Yetziat Mitzrayim, we see that there were, of course, we know, 10, starting with dam, tzvardea, blood, and frogs, etc. And if we accept the idea that the list of the makot, that the ones that they received, were in fact getting stronger and more difficult each plague that went through Egypt, such that tzvardea was worse than dam, kinim was worse than tzvardea, we're a little bit puzzled by the fact that choshech, darkness, was left to almost the last makkah, the last plague. Because assume for a moment you were given a choice, either to have frogs crawling all over you, inside your oven, inside your home, and croaking day and night, or have boils, God forbid, or to have rain down on you a mixture of ice and fire, wild animals attacking you, or sitting alone in the dark for 3 days. I would imagine almost everyone listening to this would say they would rather sit in the dark for 3 days than to in fact endure any of those other plagues. If that's the case, then why is it that choshech, darkness, was the penultimate or the next to last plague that the Egyptians had brought to them by God? The answer, and I believe this may actually help us this year, is quite straightforward. With every other plague, whether it was dam, tzvardea, arov, dever, all the other plagues, everyone who was suffering together. They were all able to turn to their neighbor and say, this is hard, this is difficult, I need comfort, I need help, I don't feel good. But they also saw that their friends were also suffering. They also understood that they were not in this alone. They understood that they could, in fact, see somebody else in the same boat and understand that they weren't alone suffering. But when it came to choshech, when it came to darkness, not only was it dark, they sat alone wherever they were, unable to move for 3 days. Imagine a scenario. You're alone in your house. As a matter of fact, not in your house. You're alone in somebody else's house. It's dark. It's cold. You have nobody to talk to, nobody to turn to. You hear creaking, you hear sounds, you hear voices, whatever you might hear, and you're terrified. You're scared because you can't turn to anybody. You can't ask for help. Choshech was the ultimate mind game. It played with the psyche of the Egyptians and said, not only are you alone, you can't even look to somebody else for help. You can't even look at your neighbor. You can't hear your neighbor. You can't touch your neighbor. You can't go anywhere near. You may know that somebody else is suffering, but you can't even help them, and they can't help you. And I think that the message is very clear for us. We are in a form of darkness right now. We really are. This is a time where we just don't know what's going to happen. When will this virus pass? When will there be a vaccine? Be'ezrat Hashem bekarov, soon in our days. When will life go back to somewhat normalcy, which is a topic for a different discussion altogether. What is normal? But now, as we find ourselves in this darker time, we are able to look to each other, whether it's on Zoom or on Skype or in video chat, or look on our mirpaset and see our neighbors, whatever it might be. We are not alone. While the Egyptians were thrust into choshech, the Egyptians were thrust into this darkness of a psychological, difficult time. We too are in a difficult time. No one's going to deny that. But at the same time, we have the ability to reach out to our neighbors, to our family, to our friends, and especially We should go out of our way to reach out to others. We should go out of our way to make sure that someone who's sitting metaphorically in the dark is brought a little light from hearing from us. We can turn what has been given to us, which is a very tough time, we can turn this to something very positive. But we can only do that if we take the action. Knowing that your neighbor might be sitting alone, knowing that your family may not be with you for Chag, knowing these issues is one thing. That's the sitting in the darkness. But unlike the Egyptians, we can reach out. We could talk to each other. We can try to console. We can try to comfort. We could try to be there for each other. I hope that this message will help ease the pain just a little bit in the difficult times that we are in. And may Hashem send a refuah shlema to all those who are sick around the world, to all those who are sick, except for Sonei Yisrael, and bring the geula shlema with Eliyahu Hanavi announcing it on the night of Pesach. Amen. Chag Samech v'Kasher.